Watch for these Western Conference players to have a breakout season this year. We'll discuss this and much more coming up on this episode of Hattrick HQ. Hi, I'm your host KC alongside my co-host Mark Pye, and welcome back to Hattrick HQ. But before we get into the topic of this video, we just like to say that 97% of you guys aren't subscribed. So if you're looking for a home to daily NHL content, look no further. Hit that subscribe button. We're trying to hit 250 subscribers before the season starts. And we just want to say thank you to you guys for getting us to 200 subscribers. We really appreciate it. We're only like 2 weeks into the channel and we already got 200 subscribers. It's blowing our expectations out of the water, and we just want to say thank you. But with that out of the way, we're going to get right into the topic of this video, which is watch for these players to break out this season. And the first player we're going to talk about here is Wyatt Johnston of the Dallas Stars. Obviously, going into his sophomore year, a lot of people are expecting him to have a sophomore slump. But I don't think that's the case for Wyatt Johnston. Obviously, last year had 41 points in 82 games. And as we take a look at an article here put out by ESPN, they say Johnson had a strong rookie season with 41 points in 82 games and will continue to build on that and watch to be a breakout 2023-2024. His all-around skill set and his expected top six role in the lineup make it likely that Johnson will avoid the sophomore slump to take a big step forward this coming season. Mark, obviously, Wyatt Johnston came out of nowhere last year and surprised everyone. And what do you think about your expectations for him this season?
I mean, you look at the Dallas Stars, and they have such a good team that they've built over there. I mean, on the back end, they got Heiskanen up front. I mean, like a guy like Joe Pavelski at the age of, what is it, 38, is still playing incredible. I think a guy like Wyatt, you've seen he's a bit of an explosive player. You know, he looks good. He can finish. He can skate. He can play defense. And the type of guy I think you can slot straight into your top six. And I think he's going to play great for the Dallas Stars next year.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. Obviously, Dallas has been like a really underrated team pretty much their whole time in the NHL. They always seem to have a decent team and they always seem to be contending for a playoff spot. And then once they get into that playoff spot, they always surprise a lot of teams and take a series or two or even push a cup run like they did a couple of years ago. So obviously, I think, like you said, Wyatt Johnson is a great addition for this team last season. Obviously, a lot of people didn't expect him to do as well as he did, but I think now when he gets more minutes up here in his top six role, I think he's going to explode out of his shell here, and I think we're looking maybe for a 60 point season from him this year. But we're going to get into our next player here, who is Quinton Byfield from the LA Kings. Obviously, Byfield was number 2 overall pick in 2020. Was struggling to kind of find his place in the NHL over the last little while. Last year he got 53 games played with 22 points, and then he played some down there with the Ontario Reign. And ESPN goes on to say here that obviously he hasn't put up big numbers in the NHL yet, but he's getting better each year, and the 2023-24 could be the season he finally breaks through. The 6'5" center looked good in the Kings' first round playoff series against the Oilers last spring with 4 points in 6 games, and he'll look to build off that going into this season. Obviously, Byfield is one of the players that I'm excited for to get time in the NHL. I think when I was looking at this guy going into the draft a couple of years ago, I think this was one of the guys who was on my radar to be the next NHL star. You don't see a lot of these big 6'5" guys that have the skill that he does, and I hope he has a good year this year. What are your expectations for Byfield this year, Mark?
The worst thing with Byfield is he's kind of in the situation with the Kings just acquiring Pierre-Luc Dubois. If he's playing center, you know, Kopitar is your bona fide number one. You know, you got Pierre-Luc Dubois just sliding in at your second center. And that kind of leaves a weird spot for Byfield. I mean, if the Kings want to develop him as a center, it's obviously not a bad thing to have a 1-2-3 punch down the middle with those three guys. But I feel like for him to have a kind of a big season and a big offensive output, he might need to slide into the top six on the wing. But I mean, if it's an opportunity, you can put him down on the third line. He kind of gets gelling with a couple teammates. I do think he can have an incredible season. I think he's an incredible prospect, and I think the Kings have a really good situation down the middle right now.
Yeah, definitely. And the Kings were a team last year who surprised a lot of people too. Obviously, going into their last years with Doughty and Kopitar, looking to kind of get another push going before those guys hangs up the skates. But Byfield, obviously, if they give him a trial run at wing, it doesn't hurt them, right? You know, if say he wants to slot up into to get those minutes, and if he's playing on the second line on the wing with Pierre-Luc Dubois, obviously he's just going to have a great season. But I think if they do keep the traditional route and keep him at his position at center, I think him at a third line center is a great thing for this team because that just improves their center depth. And I think we could look to see if he stays in the center. I think we could look to see at least 30 points, 25 points on that third line this season, depending on ice time and all that stuff. Because I know Kopitar is getting up there, so maybe he might take a hit in ice time this year, but you never know what goes on throughout the season. I think, if one of those guys goes down with injury, I think he can step up no problem. And we're going to get into our next player here, who is Jamie Drysdale from the Anaheim Ducks. Drysdale, obviously last year, only played 8 games, didn't have any points, but the season before had 32 points in 81 games. And ESPN goes on to say here, last season didn't go as planned for Drysdale, who was limited to 8 games due to a shoulder injury, but the 21-year-old is expected to be good to go for the 2023-24 season and is primed to break out. He's an excellent skater, great playmaker with instincts at both ends of the ice to be an elite defenseman in the NHL. Obviously, Jamie Drysdale was another guy who was on my radar going into that draft year. I think this guy it has the potential to just fly in the NHL. I think, when you got a good puck-moving defenseman like him, especially on a team with, Zegras and all those guys, I think he's poised for a good year this year. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, like we've seen last year, Anaheim's defense was one of the worst of the era that we've ever seen. So them losing Drysdale in that situation did hurt a lot. I think, he's going to come in. The Ducks aren't expecting to make a big push for the playoffs, but they're kind of reshaping their team. So a guy like Jamie, like I said in the last video, you got Zegras up front, who's one of the most explosive and fun players to watch. You put Drysdale down there as the quarterback for him, and I think this duo is going to be incredible together. They might not do anything huge point-wise this year, but I mean, just the on-ice performance, I think it's going to be well worth the watch. I mean, if he puts up 35, 40 points, plus minus might be a little rough, but who cares about that at that point? But I think he's a hell of a guy, and I think he's going to do great.
Yeah, it's another guy here who's looking for a contract, I believe, going into this season, an RFA, still unsigned, but I think, they'll get that hashed out now before training camp or in the midst of training camp, and I think he'll be good to go for the beginning of the season. And like you said, you hit the nail on the head. I think, I think he's good for about 40 points this year. That's what I think I got him clocked at, and I think this Anaheim Ducks organization has such a bright future, and having a great puck-moving defenseman like that on the D is just a great recipe for success in the future. But we're going to get into our next player here, who is Bowen Byram of the Colorado Avalanche. Obviously, Byram was a 4th overall draft pick in 2019, only 22 years of age. Has played pretty good, in my opinion, in the NHL. 24 points in 42 games last year. And he obviously had 17 points in 30 games, but was great in that playoff run they had just a couple of years ago. And they go on here, ESPN, to say him, at 22 years old, Byram has already checked off 2/3 of the boxes to be a member of the Triple Gold Club, winning a World Junior Gold in 2020 and a Stanley Cup in 2022. If the NHL ever decides to return to the Olympics, there's a good chance Byram would be on Team Canada's roster. He also checks off all the boxes to be an elite defender in the NHL, but injuries have been an issue, limiting him to just 91 games since the shortened 2020-21 season. If Byram can stay healthy, he'll show that he's capable of doing in the NHL and add to the already phenomenal Avalanche blue line. Obviously, like I said, Byram has been one of the guys who's been on my watch list for numerous seasons now, but obviously due to injuries, we haven't really got to see him hit his full potential yet in the NHL, but I think, if he has a healthy year this year, I think he's just going to skyrocket. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, that's the biggest thing with him is the kind of the health issue. As I said in the article, what was it, 91 games over the past 2 to 3 years, which is a little hard to, get your groove going, but when you look at a team like Colorado, they are built for success. I mean, on the back end, you have Cale Makar, who's no doubtly, in my opinion, the best defenseman in the league. And just having Byram there as even like your second or third kind of option on that team, I think this team's just going to completely flourish with all this young talent. With Byram, if he can stay healthy, I mean, like a 30, 35, 40-point season, I think would be incredible. He's a great two-way guy. It's just the health thing is the biggest issue here. He just needs to get a full 82 games under his belt.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. I think, when you're that young and you're dealing with health issues like that, it's not good. But hopefully he makes a full recovery and he doesn't have to deal with that anymore in the future. And I think if he stays healthy, he's obviously going to be one of the most elite defenders in the league at only 22 years of age. I think with all that winning culture experience under his belt, I think he's just a great addition to the blue line of the Colorado Avalanche. And like you said, they're built for success, and just having such a strong decor has been such a great asset for their team and why they won that Stanley Cup just a couple of years ago. But we'd like to hear your guys' takes on this down in the comment section below. Which one of these players do you think is going to be the most successful this year? Any players that we didn't mention that you think are going to break out, let us know down in the comment section below. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like down below and make sure to smash that subscribe button. We're trying to hit 250 before the season starts, and we're very close. So thank you guys again for all your support. I've been KC alongside my co-host Mark Pye. Keep your stick on the ice.